Hello guys, welcome to this short tutorial where I'm going to be explaining terms like promises, resolve, reject, async, and await in JavaScript. Now, I may not go through all there is to know about these terms, but my plan is to go through the absolute basics um, so you have a little understanding about um, what exactly they are, because if you're an absolute beginners, this can be a real headache. You might not need them, but you might find them in someone else's code, and you may want to know exactly what they mean, and you want to know where, when, and why, or which cases they can be used. Um, so I think the most important thing to know is that JavaScript, unlike other programming languages, is asynchronous. I may not pronounce that correctly, but so what that means is that JavaScript really doesn't care what order your code is written in. So you may have something. Let me just say line one and line two. JavaScript is really about timing. It doesn't matter what order. So if line one takes longer to execute, it's gonna go directly to line two. So your output doesn't the way your output look really doesn't depend on the order in which your code is written in. So if line one takes 5 seconds to execute and line two takes 2 seconds, then the result of your output is going to show is going to display the result of line 2 first before displaying the result of line 1. Now I think Python actually waits for the first line to execute before proceeding to the second line. I'm not sure, but JavaScript really doesn't care. Like, it just keeps going unless it runs into errors, in which case your code is gonna break and you're gonna get in your console or terminal what went wrong. Um, so enough talk. Let's talk about how we can define. Let's just start by defining a simple function, and in this function I'm gonna have my promise. So I'm gonna name my function simple promise. Um, and every time we create new promises, we always use the constructor, which is always new promise, and then it takes the parameters, and that is resolve and rejects. And so the resolve returns a successful output, and reject returns an error. And I'm gonna make this into a function. Um, and okay, so now we have a promise, but there is still nothing there, and we're not even making use of the promise. And so promises, like, the main reason we have promises is because we in coding we work with conditions all the time. So you want to know if something happens or if something doesn't happen. You want to know if the code ran into an error, and this is especially useful if you're fetching data. So you want to know if the fetch was successful or not. But I'm not going to be using fetch as an example because, like I said, I want to make it really basic. So I'm going to use a simple condition. So if 1 plus 1 equals 2, it should resolve and say, we could say successful, but I want to say math checks out. So, and this is always going to resolve to math checkout because 1 plus 1 is always going to equal 2, unless they somehow change math. But so else it should reject, which is never going to happen because, like I said, 1 plus 1 always equals 2. Else reject and say math doesn't check out. So here's our first step. Now we have our promise, but we are not even making use of this promise, and we haven't even called this function. So, but we have our promise. The first thing, let me just put a semicolon here for readability sake. But now we want the code to return the promise, return test, and I can actually just put a return statement here, but this tutorial is all about readability, so this is easier for beginners to read. So return test, so it's going to return what's inside this promise. Now if I go ahead and execute this code, nothing is going to happen. Like the code actually runs properly, but it's just that we are not making use of what is being we're not making use of the promise, and we need to access this resolve and reject to know exactly what is going on. And so we can do that two ways. And the second way, which I'm going to explain later, is by using async and await. But the first way, which is kind of a little bit easier, or the easier way, is to just call the function simple promise. Now if we call this, nothing is still going to happen because we haven't accessed the resolve and return reject, I mean. So we need to do then get a new variable. We can call this whatever. I can call it data, I can call it results, anything. So if a function console.log data. So this is gonna log math checks out, but if it runs into error, we don't have anything for catching error. But that is because 1 plus 1 is never gonna is always gonna equal 2. If I have 1 plus 1 equals 2, we're gonna run into an error, and you see we don't have anything for catching that error. So it just displays a bunch of things I don't understand. So console.log data, we need to catch that error. So the catch error, and our function. My computer is screaming for help. So console.log error. So now the error is gonna be math doesn't check out. Wait, math doesn't out? Wow. Math checks out, math doesn't check out. Maybe I should go back to English school or something. So math doesn't check out there. And now, like I said, there are two ways to do this. Now let me just comment this out. So this doesn't this is just a comment, so it doesn't work. As you can see, let me clear this output. So nothing happens because this is a comment. And so now I want to use async and await. So why do we have async and await? So async is just like like JavaScript is naturally asynchronous, but the asynchronous even make like this as async function is usually used with await. So we're awaiting usually a promise. Now let me name my function because we want to be since I want to await this function here, so I'm just going to name it async simple promise. All right. Now I want to get the results. So to do that, now let me just run this again. If I run this, nothing will happen. Let me remove this so you can see both better. So async function, and I'm gonna use since I want to construct and await, I'm gonna use a variable which I'm gonna call let. You can use const, it doesn't really matter. Let test2 equals await. We're going to be awaiting this function, so simple promise. So we are waiting for this function to execute. So this function is not going to this async function is not going to complete until this function has executed. So async await simple promise, and so when now we want to get what this function returns. So this function returns test. So we want to since test2 is what we defined for the function, I'm going to put return test2. So now what's wrong? what did I do? Oh yeah, is that it? Let test. Okay, this isn't needed. Let test is called equals await simple promise, and we're gonna return this test. Now why is this text was declared but its value was never read? Okay, I'm just gonna put console.log test2. Now what is going on? Await simple promise. Console log test2. Right. Oh yeah, that is totally my bad. Um, we since we're awaiting a function, like there's no need in defining the function again. So we just let test2 equals await simple promise. That is just a variable. My bad. So await simple promise, and we're gonna console log what the function returns. Now let me clear this output. Now the reason we're not getting anything is because we're not actually, or we haven't called any function yet. So all I did was define two functions. So I still need to call this function async simple promise. And also to mention, just for the sake of it, like it doesn't matter which order you define your function. Like JavaScript doesn't take that into account, but it's what it takes into account is the timing and which order your commands are. So I call this function now. It should log. Oh, there's an error now. Oh, and that is because we didn't catch the error. And also, if we have 1 plus 1 equals 2, then we should get math checks out. But since we need to catch it, we need to write a case in case there's an error. I'm going to use a try and catch. So try try this, and if this doesn't work, so catch error, catch the error, and it should console the, you could use console the error, but since I'm in an IDE, like it's better for me to use a console log. Like there's no point in console error, because console.log error, if you're in a browser, it highlights the error, it makes it red, or uses a special format or something. So console.log the error that occurred. So now I want to get an error. So so I'm just gonna change this to like 17, and because it's gonna return, it's gonna reject, it's not gonna check out. So we're gonna get an error, and this is gonna return the error. So math doesn't check out. So I know this probably not difficult to understand at first, but it's basically what is meant when we talk about async, await, promises, resolve, and reject. So just to recap, we made a function, and in that function we defined our we constructed our promise with condition that it resolves if one condition is valid, and rejects if that condition isn't valid. So this condition is not valid, so it's going to reject. And remember, reject always rejects. It always outputs an error. Now we have an async function to wait for that promise to execute, and now we're going to console log the result of that promise, and also catch the error, and then call the async function. So I hope this made it a little bit understandable, and yeah, so that's just that about async, await, promises, resolve, and reject. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.